The impeachment showdown. I'm Adrienne Pedersen. Today on Upfront. Historic House hearings. Will they lead to the impeachment of President Trump? Next, Wisconsin Democratic Congressman Ron Kind.
As each day passes, the case looks more and more problematic for the president.
His district voted for President Trump. I'll ask how he'll vote on impeachment. Plus, out of control, horrific hit and runs in Milwaukee. How the city hopes to curb reckless driving.
Taking on the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with your host, Adrienne Pedersen.
Thank you for joining us. Hearings resume later this week in Washington as House Democrats move toward a vote that could make President Trump only the third in the U.S. to be impeached. U.S. diplomats testified in the first round of televised hearings last week. The testimony centers around the president's dealings with Ukraine and whether he directed the withholding of military aid to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says President Trump's actions amount to bribery. The president calls the inquiry a sham and a hoax. So we're talking now with Democratic Congressman Ron Kind of La Crosse, who joins us now from Washington. So, Congressman, thank you so much for your time. You know, Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling the president's actions bribery. From what you've heard so far, how do you describe what the president did?
First of all, Adrienne, I was unfortunately here for the last impeachment inquiry with President Clinton, and I'm the only member of Congress that voted for both impeachment inquiries, the Clinton inquiry and now the Trump inquiry. And as a former special prosecutor, we've got to get to the underlying facts and evidence because these are very serious allegations. And I would hope that we can all agree as Americans that it's not right for any one of us to be approaching a foreign government, asking them to do a political hit job on any of our rivals, and asking them to directly meddle in our election system. So, you know, the hearings are going to go forward. We're going to be asking questions. We're going to try to gather the facts and then determine what the appropriate remedy should be.
Some Democrats already have their mind made up. They are going to vote to impeach. What about you? Do you have your mind made up?
Well, we still have some witnesses that are going to be testifying. I wish we were getting better cooperation from the administration, quite frankly, as far as the availability of their witnesses and documents that have been requested. But they've been stonewalling the Congress every step of the way. And that's not good either. One of the reasons I voted in favor of the Clinton impeachment inquiry is because I view my role as a co-equal branch very seriously. There's no other institution in our democracy that can be a check on the executive branch other than Congress. And that's exactly what our founders intended. And it does require some cooperation between the two branches to make sure that we're all playing by the same rules and abiding by the law, especially the Constitution.
So do you know how you will vote yet? Or do you need this next week to make up your mind?
You know, evidence and information is still being gathered. And I would hope everyone can keep an open mind until they hear all the testimony and all the documents that are pertinent. I mean, these allegations are very seriously. If it's true that the president was trying to bribe a country like the Ukraine, when we have direct national security interests, to help them rebel a Russian invasion in the eastern part of their country, or withholding White House meetings, or withholding trade preferences as more evidence comes out, that's extremely problematic because it's not just about what happened in this specific instance. It's giving the green light to every country in the world that wants to meddle with our democracy or any other democracy around the globe. But it also subjects our president to being blackmailed because these foreign leaders know that what he's requesting is illegal, it's improper, and it could be used against him in leverage. And so there's a lot of dimensions to all this that we have to uncover.
President Trump won your district in 2016. How does that factor into what you do with this impeachment process?
In all honesty, not one single bit. This is so serious. And I have said from the beginning that impeachment should be a last resort, not a convenient option, not something to be used as a political weapon, because it's such an extraordinary remedy. And I'm approaching it from that basis. I'm a former special prosecutor, and I know how important it is to gather all the facts and the evidence before you know what the proper course of action should be.
Republicans just launched some full-page ads in newspapers against you and other members of the House for supporting the impeachment inquiry. What is the feeling right now in your district when it comes to the president?
Well, I'm troubled that Republicans are prejudging this case because they clearly haven't seen all the evidence, all the facts, or heard all the testimony, and yet they've clearly already reached a conclusion. They've already prejudged this many many months ago, I'm afraid. And in fact, that's what we're seeing here in Washington in the course of the hearings. It's nothing but more distraction, obstruction. They don't want to talk about the facts and the evidence that is being placed in front of them. And that's unfortunate, because we members of Congress really need to defend the institution that we represent, the Congress.
You were in office during President Clinton's impeachment. You have experience with this. In the end, do you think that President Trump will be ultimately removed from office? I know that's steps down the road, but do you think that will happen?
Well, that judgment will rest with the United States Senate, and they're going to have to weigh the evidence in the trial if it does come to that in the Senate. But let me just say that as each day passes, as the investigation continues and the testimony is garnered, the case looks more and more problematic for the president. I think the evidence is pointing to a clear involvement of him trying to, again, blackmail the Ukraine president to conduct a political hit job on one of his rivals, and using the withholding of $400 million of military aid that the Congress had already appropriated to rebel a Russian advance in their eastern territory as leverage, and also withholding a White House meeting with the newly elected president of Ukraine and withholding trade preferences with Ukraine. And no one has showed me any evidence to the contrary of that narrative. And that should be problematic to all Americans.
Senator Ron Johnson's name has come up quite a bit, and so Upfront reached out to House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff's office and asked if they would call Ron Johnson for testimony. They wouldn't tell us if they would or if they wouldn't. How important do you think his potential testimony could be?
Well, again, based on what I've read, it seems as if he has some direct personal knowledge of what was taking place in the withholding of aid to Ukraine many, many months ago. And the fact that he wasn't coming forward with that information, again, is problematic for me and others, when he ought to be standing up for the institution of Congress rather than any loyalty or adherence to one individual or one political party. And so I would encourage Senator Johnson, if he's got firsthand knowledge, that he really does have a constitutional obligation and a patriotic duty to come forward with that information.
Switching gears just a little bit, when Vice President Mike Pence was in town, he took a bit of a jab at you, asking you to pass the USMCA. We're now hearing that Speaker Pelosi said she's aiming for a vote on it before the year's end. Will you support it?
Well, I go back quite a ways with Vice President Pence. We served in the House together. We were colleagues and friends, quite frankly, and he knows I'm intimately involved in the negotiations to try to wrap up the trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. I think it is important that we move forward with a constructive trade relationship with our two border neighbors, our two largest export markets. Just for the sake of certainty, it would be nice to wrap it up. But what they negotiated was very weak and very poor when it came to the enforcement provisions. You could have the greatest trade agreement in the world on paper, but if it lacks meaningful enforcement, it is meaningless. And a large part of what we're trying to accomplish is elevating standards up so that our workers, our farmers, our businesses in Wisconsin have an equal playing field on which to compete, and something that can be enforced if either Mexico or Canada is not living up to the agreement. I get the impression that the administration really could care less about the enforcement. They only want some political victory.
At this point, do you see yourself voting for it?
Well, unless they can strengthen the enforcement language, which we're working to try to do, I don't want to support an agreement that can be ignored by the other two countries. So there's still a little bit of work to do. We are making progress, however. We've been negotiating in good faith with the President's trade team almost on a daily basis, and it would be nice to get this done before the end of the year.
Before I let you go, Congressman, I saw your tweet that you shaved your head in solidarity with your son for his cancer treatment. And I just want to know if there's anything you wanted to tell us about how he's doing.
Well, he's doing great. The prognosis is excellent. The hair didn't make it, so his brothers and I had a head shaving party last week to show our solidarity with him. But it also shows how important it is for all of us to have access to quality health care in our lives.
Well, we are wishing your son the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up.
I think if you're not actively leading in this, then you are falling behind.
Kids and computers. Is Wisconsin keeping up with teaching students computer science? But first, dangerous, reckless drivers, the scope of the problem, and what Milwaukee can do to stop it.
Upfront, brought to you by WPS Health Insurance.